Right now, you're most probably watching this video on your phone, which has a lot more capabilities than you do. It is able to contact people all over the world, and it has access to knowledge, which you don't. And yet, your phone isn't considered alive while you are. So, what is it that really makes something alive? The answer, which is biology, says that this plant and I are made out of these tiny little structures that do their processes that make up all this, while your phone is not made out of those little structures, which is why it's not alive. But it's not like someone just sat down and thought of this one day. There's a story to how this developed. Let's check out this TEDx video, which gives a little bit of perspective.
One of the great things about science is that when scientists make a discovery, it's not always in a prescribed manner, as in only in a laboratory under strict settings with white lab coats and all sorts of neat science gizmos that go beep. In reality, the events and people involved in some of the major scientific discoveries are as weird and varied as they get. My case in point, the weird history of the cell theory. There are 3 parts to the cell theory. 1. All organisms are composed of one or more cells. 2. The cell is the basic unit of structure and organization in organisms. And 3. All cells come from pre-existing cells.
This right here is the key to everything we're going to learn from here on out, so it's worth repeating. First, the cell theory says that everything that is alive is made out of at least one cell, and that the cell is the basic unit of structure of everything that is alive. And third, that cells always come from other cells. Let's carry on.
To be honest, this all sounds incredibly boring until you dig a little deeper into how the world of microscopic organisms and this theory came to be. It all started in the early 1600s in the Netherlands, where a spectacle maker named Zacharias Janssen is said to have come up with the first compound microscope, along with the first telescope. Both claims are often disputed, as apparently he wasn't the only bored guy with a ton of glass lenses to play with at the time. Despite this, the microscope soon became a hot item that every naturalist or scientist at the time wanted to play with, making it much like the iPad of its day. One such person was a fellow Dutchman by the name of Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who heard about these microscope doohickeys, and instead of going out and buying one, he decided to make his own. And it was a strange little contraption indeed, as it looked more like a tiny paddle the size of a sunglass lens. If he had stuck 2 together, it probably would have made a wicked set of sunglasses that you couldn't see much out of. Anywho, once Leeuwenhoek had his microscope ready, he went to town looking at anything and everything he could with them, including the gunk on his teeth. Yes, you heard right. He actually discovered bacteria by looking at dental scrapings, which, when you keep in mind that people didn't brush their teeth much, if at all, back then, he must have had a lovely bunch of bacteria to look at.
This right here is crucial because the compound microscope, which Leeuwenhoek used, gave him the ability to look at cells, and is still what we use, including in class, to look at cells.
When he wrote about his discovery, he didn't call them bacteria as we know them today, but he called them animalcules because they looked like little animals to him. While Leeuwenhoek was staring at his teeth gunk, he was also sending letters to a scientific colleague in England by the name of Robert Hooke. Hooke was a guy who really loved all aspects of science, so he dabbled in a little bit of everything, including physics, chemistry, and biology. Thus it is Hooke who we can thank for the term the cell, as he was looking at a piece of cork under his microscope, and the little chambers he saw reminded him of cells, or the rooms monks slept in their monasteries. Think college dorm rooms, but without the TVs, computers, and really annoying roommates.
All right, so here is the first part of the story. This is actually number 2 in the cell theory, and this is that the cells are the most basic unit of structure, and this is what Hooke saw when he looked at cork, at onions, and all sorts of things.
Fast forward to the 1800s, where 2 German scientists discovered something that today we might find rather obvious. but helped tie together what we now know as the cell theory. The first scientist was Matthias Schleiden, a botanist who liked to study plants under a microscope. From his years of studying different plant species, it finally dawned on him that every single plant he had looked at were all made of cells. At the same time, on the other end of Germany was Theodor Schwann, a scientist who not only studied slides of animal cells under the microscope and got a special type of nerve cell named after him, but also invented rebreathers for firefighters and had a kickin' pair of sideburns. After studying animal cells for a while, he too came to the conclusion that all animals were made of cells. Immediately, he reached out via snail mail, as Twitter had yet to be invented, to other scientists working in the same field, and it was Schleiden who got back to him, and the two started working on the beginnings of the cell theory.
Schleiden giving us the first part, that everything that is alive is made out of cells, including all sorts of plants and all sorts of animals.
A bone of contention arose between them as for the last part of the cell theory, that cells come from pre-existing cells. Schleiden didn't exactly subscribe to that thought, as he swore cells came from free cell formation, where they just kind of spontaneously crystallized into existence. That's when another scientist, named Rudolf Virchow, stepped in with research showing that cells did come from other cells.
Finally, Virchow, that cells come from other cells, pre-existing cells.
Research that was actually, how to put it, borrowed without permission from a Jewish scientist by the name of Robert Remak, which led to two more feuding scientists. Thus, from teeth gunk to torquing off Newton, crystallization to Schwann cells, the cell theory came to be an important part of biology today. Some things we know about science today may seem boring, but how we came to know them is incredibly fascinating. So if something bores you, dig deeper. It's probably got a really weird story behind it somewhere.
So now we have a basic idea of how the discovery of cells began. Throughout this video, you will see a little pop-up which will show that this is an important place to pay attention because there is a question about it down below. Please make sure to answer those questions as well and submit the form. If you have any trouble understanding the concept, send me your questions in the Google Classroom. And stay tuned. See you in the next one.